Wheat Waffles is a very popular YouTube who is known as the leader of the black pill movement, which is basically a type of fatalism in that if you're below a 5 in terms of looks, you should just give up on dating. You should either move to Thailand or you should just buy hookers, right? You should accept your fate, that it's important to accept your fate. And I'm a dating coach who teaches men how to go out and approach women and meet a girlfriend, to get laid, whatever. But I teach the exact opposite. My experience probably contradicts his in many ways. But I think it's going to be interesting to watch his video in which he says 3 reasons why you should never approach women in public, which is exactly what I teach men how to do. So I want to find out, do his arguments make sense or are they completely illogical? Let's find out.
Excuse me, do you want to hear a story for a second?
Yes.
I was literally practicing my skills all day just so I can come over and say hi to you.
That's it?
Yeah, what's up?
No, I'm not talking. Sorry.
You're not allowed to.
No.
You're on the phone. Well, okay, well, I'll transition to this lady. You wouldn't believe what just happened. She rejected me. It's really sad. Can you believe that?
I'm waiting for next time.
That was video of someone called Bradicus. Now, Bradicus, he does some awkward things. Like, that was pretty awkward. That was not good cold approach. That was not an example of how you should be talking to women in public if you want to get success. But he's using this guy as an example of why you shouldn't approach women in public, why it's a bad idea, it's not going to work. The funny thing, Bradicus, who has been canceled, he's been taken off of YouTube and TikTok, all those things, he's been canceled. He had hundreds of hours of footage of himself bringing girls home, of himself making out with girls, very hot girls, by the way, of him being in romantic situations, like in his place, in beds with girls. It's very clear that this guy was having an incredible amount of success, and yet Wheat Waffles is cherry picking this very awkward, admittedly, awkward interaction to say cold approach doesn't work. This is proof. But the guy he's using as proof is actually proof that cold approach does work. So the rest of this video is already kind of null and void because the example he's using actually proves the exact opposite point that he's trying to show.
You know I'm ready.
Memorize this off by heart, guys. If you approach women as a sub 5 like either of these, they'll run away from you. If you're a normie, they'll tolerate your presence for maybe 5 minutes before giving you a soft rejection, like, sorry, I have a boyfriend. And if you're a Chad, they'll feel flattered you've approached them and they'll gladly give you their number. In this video, I'm going to be giving you 3 reasons why cold approach, pickup art, day game, or whatever you want to call it, is mostly a waste of time strategy for any average or below average guys. And though it's not anywhere nearly as bad as online dating or nightclub approaching as covered in the last 2 episodes, in my opinion, it still makes the top 3 for worst possible approaching strategy.
I'm very curious what the good strategy is. Like, if those are all bad, what's the correct strategy? Sugar babies? Like, I'm kind of curious about that.
Number 1, you need to be good looking for cold approach to be effective. This study that Alexander Grace introduced me to shows how important looks are when hitting on girls you don't know. The process was as follows. A team of 7 judges had to rate 167 couples, that's 334 total participants, on a scale from 1 to 7 in terms of attractiveness. Remember that piece of information, it's out of 7, not 10.
Okay.
For example, this person may have been given scores of 5, 5, 6, 6, 6, 7, 7, which means their average score will be 6. Meanwhile, this person may have been given scores of 1, 5 2s, and a 3, which means their average will be 2.
Sure.
Next, once everyone had their scores calculated, they tried to see if there was a correlation between each couple's scores. In other words, if we were to draw a graph with the boyfriend's attractiveness out of 7 on the x-axis and his girlfriend's attractiveness out of 7 on the y-axis, will there be a correlation?
So the first problem with this is that it's boyfriend and girlfriend. And when it comes to cold approach, getting laid and getting a boyfriend / girlfriend can be two completely different things. So even if, let's say, this does show that couples tend to be similar in attractiveness, that doesn't necessarily mean that people they hook up with or have casual relationships or things like that, it doesn't mean they're similar in attractiveness. So that's one problem already with this study, but let's see how it goes.
For each of the couple's looks. E.g., if a man got rated a 5, is he more likely to be dating someone around his own looks level compared to what a lower rated guy, say a 2, could expect to get?
Sure.
The results were eye-opening. They found when a couple did not know each other before they started dating, say because the man cold approached the woman in the street, there was a strong correlation of attractiveness for couples.
All right, so he's failed pretty hard to understand the study here because he said when the couple did not know each other, it does not say they cold approached. It does not say he approached her. It could very easily be, based on the way he's explaining it, that they met online. They didn't know each other because they met online, and in online dating, looks are far more important because it's purely based on pictures. So this entire premise is kind of meaningless since it doesn't actually specify cold approach. That is not what they're researching, so the point he's making isn't even about the thing that the study's talking about.
Formed this way. The correlation factor was 0.7, which when plotted on our graph would look something like this. A clear uptrend with only minor deviations from the line of best.
Those deviations do not look minor if you look carefully at it. Like there's some pretty big differences there. And a 0.7 correlation is a strong correlation. It's nowhere near a perfect correlation, right? So it shows there is actually a good amount of variance between the attractiveness in couples. A 0.7 is not a 1.0. It's not even close. So saying, oh, a 0.7, it proves that looks are all that mattered because they have a high correlation. High correlation and perfect correlation are not the same thing. 0.7 means, yes, generally a better looking person is with a better looking person, but there's a lot of wiggle room between those two things. I don't know if this guy understands what correlation even means.
It shows you're mostly tied to your looks match or dating within your league when you're trying to meet women you have not met before.
Like online, not necessarily cold approach.
In contrast, for couples that met through warm approach and were already friends before they started dating, these had far less of a correlation between their looks. The correlation factor was only 0.4, which is a little looks matched. However, there's still plenty of room for outlier couples to be formed where there's large disparities in looks between the man and woman. For example,
so this could just be showing that when people meet online dating, they're more likely to be close on attractiveness. And when they meet not online, when they meet through their social circle, it's more. But it doesn't necessarily even compare to cold approach. And even if it does, this is just one study. One study cannot prove something in psychology. Second, it's a correlational study, which does not establish causation. So when two things are related, they're not necessarily because of each other. It could be the opposite direction. It could be some third factor that is completely unrelated that's causing this difference. So, for example, one thing that's been proven is that there are more murders when ice cream sales go up. Ice cream sales cause murders, right? There's a correlation. They must cause each other. No, the reason is that ice cream sales go up in the summer. There are more murders in the summer. So it has nothing to do with the ice cream sales, it has to do with the summer itself. But the point is, correlation doesn't prove anything. And unless he's gonna show a bunch of different studies or show a study that establishes causation, it really doesn't prove anything. It's a very novice level understanding of how psychology works to use a correlational study to say you've proven a point. It means you really don't understand statistics, you don't understand psychology, and you don't understand how to make the connection between cause and effect.
You have this couple over here where a 7 out of 7 man is dating a 4 out of 7 woman. Then, all the way over here, you have...
So these are all the data points. If this is all the data points, what is the sample size? 1, 2, 3, 6, 10, it's about 20, 25. A sample size of 25, you're using 25 couples to prove a point. That is a very, very weak sample. That doesn't prove anything. It's way too small. So even if it wasn't a correlational study, which it is, even if it wasn't a 0.7, which is not that strong of a correlation, it is also a tiny sample size. The problem with scientific authority is you can read a journalist talking about a study and saying it proves this and this. It's not true, especially in soft sciences like psychology. One study doesn't prove anything. One study doesn't come close to proving something true or false, and a lot of the studies are not even very well designed. So just because it's science doesn't mean it's proving something. That's something that's very, very important to understand.
2 out of 7 man dating a 5 out of 7 woman. Therefore, what this part of the study reveals is that when approaching in a warm environment, such as a university class, dating up or down a league becomes very feasible.
Again, completely wrong. This guy really does not understand the study he's talking about.
But if a man tries doing this through cold approach, his chances go down considerably, and his best options are by approaching those around his own looks level. All of this makes perfect sense too from a logical standpoint. Going back to warm approach, a man like this may have been able to get this relationship with a woman way above his looks level because he's had more time to show all of his other merits going for him beyond just his looks. He may have a great social circle, social status, a few common interests with the girl, or just all round good in depth.
You can show all of those things in a cold approach, right? You can invite a girl to a social circle event that you're throwing. I used to invite girls to meditation classes that I taught. I used to invite them to volleyball games that we threw, parties, things like that. So you can show you have social circle. You can show you have status, personality, all of those things in a cold approach. He's creating a false dichotomy that doesn't make any sense.
Conversations. All of these things will boost his chances, which may allow him to date up a couple points. In contrast, when looking at cold approach, there's only 2 variables of SMV that will determine a man's success. 1, looks, which is comprised primarily of face, body, and height, and 2, your game/social skills. I'd say around 70% of it is your looks, and the remaining 30% is your game.
All right, anyone can make up statistics. That's cool.
Anyway, that's the first point. So if you've enjoyed the first couple minutes of the video, now is a good time to press the like button and leave any thoughts you have in the comments.
Definitely
below.
press the like button. This guy is doing a service to society by showing the truth. He understands what he's talking about on a very deep level, and he's definitely not an ideologue that has been poisoned by reading too many forum posts and not understanding how scientific research even works.
YouTube algorithm. Reason number 2, and this is somewhat related to the first point. After online dating, cold approach has the lowest rate of return. In my opinion, if you're not at least a 6 or above in SMV, I wouldn't even bother with cold approach. The rate of return is just too low. And don't let where the line is drawn deceive you. 6 or above is the top 25% of men. Most guys are a 5 or below. If you try approaching as a 4 or 5, it's like trying to cut down a tree, but with a kitchen knife. And
so this doesn't really make sense because his 5, those 2 guys are not overweight. And he sounds English, but the same is roughly true in England and the US. About 70% of men are overweight or obese. And therefore, a 5 is going to be overweight. Average is going to be overweight. That is literally the average. And when you get to where you're not overweight, that's already probably going to be a 6, right? Unless you have some kind of deformities. Because the comparison, being overweight makes you much less attractive, I think we can all agree on that. Because the comparison is to 70% of people being overweight, just not being overweight for most people would make you above a 5. And therefore, most people who are not overweight would be able to succeed in cold approach. And if that's what he's saying, I kind of agree, but according to this chart, that's not what he's saying. These examples of a 5, a 6, and a 7 don't make sense. I mean, look at his 8. That guy is about as good looking as a person could possibly be. He looks like a supermodel, but he's an 8, not a 10. How the fuck is that guy only an 8? Your scale is kind of ridiculous.
And if you try approaching as a 3, it's like using.
And look, yes, those guys, if they tried approaching, would have a very low rate of success. They're overweight and they have severe deformities, right? That guy has a severe deformity that is going to change your results, but that is an outlier. That guy's in the bottom 0.1% and isn't really relevant to the argument because the vast majority of people watching look nothing like that.
A toothbrush. The only exception to this, and the only time I would say you should try cold approaching as a 4 or 5, is if you have some niche quality about you.
I had a client who's a 5'5" Asian who's average looking the other night pull a really attractive girl, a girl who by his standards would probably be a 6.5 or 7 since his ratings are skewed, but he pulled a very attractive girl. I saw it happen with my own 2 eyes, and this guy is below average height, average looking, and Asian, which I'm sure he would consider a disadvantage. I've seen evidence that what he's saying is untrue every single week of my life since I started coaching this. And I've also uploaded infield videos showing this happen. I've shown that guys who are not very good looking can be very successful with pickup.
Such as being exceptionally tall or having red hair. Because all you'd have to do in this situation is...
I understand the being tall part, but how is red hair an advantage? No one has ever thought that being a red-haired male is an advantage in the dating market. Like, what is he talking about? No one considers that like some bonus that makes you sexy. I just, what?